Hey, this is Mr. Mitchell with another science video. Today we're going to talk about science laboratory guidelines. There will be times in your science class or future science classes where we do have some labs. And whenever you have a lab, it's a little bit different than the normal classroom, even though it's in the same room. You know that we have in our particular classroom kind of a lab table area, and whenever we are having lab instead of class, there are some kind of general guidelines that go with that. And it's not just something that we teachers at our school have made up. I did get this from the National Science Teachers Association uh, guidelines that they have. Now, I did kind of cut some of them down because I knew all of them wouldn't apply just yet. But here's what our science laboratory guidelines are. And hopefully when we have a lab, it's not going to look like this. Or this would be chaos for sure if we had labs that looked like that. But anyway, here is number one. Number one, conduct yourself in a responsible manner. In a responsible manner at all times. No frivolous activities, no mischievous behavior. You cannot throw items like these little guys right here are doing. And conducting pranks are just completely prohibited. In a lab, there's the big issue of safety. And if somebody like this is pouring something, you don't need anybody bumping into them. You definitely don't need any kind of distractions that would be hazardous to anyone at all. So lab is not a place for frivolous behavior whatsoever. Number two, lab instructions need to be read ahead of time. All verbal and written instructions shall be followed in carrying out the activity or investigation. That seems pretty straightforward. You don't jump into things. You read and then you will do. Number three, eating, drinking, gum chewing, putting on makeup, manipulating contact lenses, and other unsafe activities are not permitted in the lab. Sure, there's probably a time when you could put on makeup in the regular school day, but not during the lab time. Number four, unauthorized experiments or investigations are prohibited, and surely the teacher would not allow somebody to sniff or drink what's in the test tube here. So don't take it upon yourself to do an experiment in our lab at school. Number five, removing equipment from the classroom or laboratory is prohibited unless authorized by an instructor. And I don't think people are out just to steal things, but you cannot take even little things from the lab area. Number six, safety glasses or goggles as appropriate shall be worn during activities or demonstrations in the classroom, laboratory, or field when doing an experiment. Now, the key word here is when appropriate. There are some labs in which we do not need safety goggles. We'll be handling things like cookies or pennies or something along those lines. But you don't need to have your safety goggles up here when it is time to wear them. You do need to have them on your face when it is appropriate. And I and other teachers would probably tell you when it is appropriate ahead of time. Number seven, all accidents, spills, and injuries must be reported immediately to the teacher. No matter how trivial they may seem at the time, follow your instructor's directions for immediate treatment or check on what needs to be done. Number eight, this is a long one and I only had a little bit written here. But you can see I have quite a few things here, so listen well. You should use hair ties to tie back long hair. You see this lady right here is not only not wearing her goggles, but she is not doing anything with her hair. And that's a definite safety hazard. Do not wear loose or baggy clothing. You definitely wouldn't have this fella in the science experiment room in the laboratory. Do not wear dangling jewelry in the laboratory. Also, acrylic nails like this are a safety hazard near any kind of heat source. And whenever we're using heat sources in the experiment, they should not be used. And for obvious reasons, flip-flops, sandals, or open-toed shoe is a hazard during lab activities. Once again, some of these are all right in the regular day. Well, maybe not this guy, but some of these are all right during the regular day, but it's not going to be good for some of the labs that you may end up doing during your schooling. Number nine. Number nine, know the location of all safety equipment in the room and location of exits. Now we do not have a water shower, but we do have a sink, and that will be pretty obvious where that is once you see the classroom for a good much time at all. And we do have an exit that happens to be near the lab door. Now there is also a fire extinguisher that is right near that lab door, and you'll be able to see those, and I should be able to point those out to you. Number 10, avoid inhaling in fumes that may be generated during activity or investigation. Try your best not to inhale any fumes. Number 11, never fill pipettes by mouth suction. And you can see this old-timey picture. That's actually what people used to do. And you can imagine just how dangerous that is. If you have some kind of acid in here and you suck in just to get it up into the pipette, if it goes in that lady's mouth, that could be really bad news. We have bulbs is what we have. You can see the bulb here. By pushing the bulb in and releasing it can suck things up into the pipette and so on. And our pipettes, we have a lot of them that look like this, so that may be the type you would use depending on the experiment. Number 12, remember that hot glass looks the same as cold glass. So after heating, glass is going to remain hot for a long, long time. So determine if an object is hot by placing your hand close to the glass, but not by touching it. You actually start way up here, because if it still have any heat coming up, it might be coming up from there, and kind of get a little closer as it goes, because glass is kind of deceptive as to what the temperature is. Number 13, should a fire drill, lockdown, or other emergency occur during an investigation or activity, make sure you turn off all your equipment. You can imagine if we're out of the room for a long time, that equipment doesn't need to be going. Number 14, backpacks and books are to remain in an area designated by the instructor and shall not be brought into the lab area. Now keep in mind, we have a classroom that also serves as our lab. So whenever we do have a lab where we're doing things that are lab type activities, that's where the books and the backpacks need to leave those places. Only a couple more. Number 15, work surfaces are to be cleaned at the end of each laboratory or activity. That's just the general safety, general right thing to do. When you make a mess, it needs to be cleaned up, and it's always done at the end. And number 16, solid chemicals, metals, matches, filter papers, broken glass, and other materials are not to be put into the sink. Sinks are to be used for the disposal of water and any solution designated by me or any other instructor. Sink is not a catch-all. I know there's just that big deposit there that's on the lab table there, but that's not a place where you just toss things. Hey, I know you probably knew a little bit about general safety in labs anyway, but I'm hoping this will help you out as far as knowing the details for science laboratory guidelines. So when we do a lab, it looks nothing like this.